tonight.
Lionel, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Hello, Adam?
Hello.
Yeah, it's me, Lionel.
It's me, Adam.
Attaboy. So this is, a lot of times I have a co-host with me doing it, but tonight it's just you and me, buddy. We're flying alone. We're flying solo.
Here we go.
All right. Where are you right this minute?
I am in a hotel in Grand Junction, Colorado, on my layover from bringing train number 6, the California Zephyr, in from Salt Lake City.
How cool is that? How cool is that? And so you're a conductor on the California Zephyr.
That is correct.
How long is your layover?
Well, today it's not too bad. They're going to deadhead us home in the morning because they've got this reroute going on through Wyoming due to some track work on the Union Pacific through the Moffett Tunnel. Normally I'd go home tomorrow or about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's about a 28-hour layover, but fortunately I got lucky this weekend because I'm Monday morning. I'm heading down to Chamonix, Mexico to ride a freight train over Cumbers Pass.
Oh, so how'd you manage that? How'd you manage that?
Well, the Friends of the Cumbers and Toltec are putting on a little charter special, and I was able to get in on it.
Wow.
So me and my dad are going to head down there. Hopefully have a pretty good time.
I would think so. So how long will that ride take, do you think?
I think it's about an 8-hour ride, Chama to Antonito.
Holy moly. Jeez, we're only like 2 minutes into this thing and already. I knew it. See, I'm going to tell everybody right now. So here's how we met. I'm a friend of mine, Lex Parker, who doesn't live that far from me. I went to visit him one day there a 3 weeks ago, and he let me drive his Corvette. Which was very cool. It was it's a 2014, one of the new ones, and it's like very cool, like very, very cool. We went to a place where Lex said, yeah, kind of do what you want here, buddy. So that's as far as I'll go. But it accelerates really well. So anyways, I put up a message. Lex is struggling with cancer, as am I. We're kindred spirits in that, as well as model railroading. We're kindred spirits in that. And I put up a message, and then you sent me a friend request. And then I saw you were a conductor on the Amtrak, and I sent you a message, and then you said your wife has got breast cancer now.
Yeah.
And so I sent you a message saying, hey, if you want to talk or anything, let me know. And you sent me a message, and then we started talking, and now here we are.
Here we are.
You're in Grand Junction, and I'm in my little studio that I use to do these podcasts. So how's your wife doing then?
She's doing pretty good. It's been a pretty rough year. One of my really, really close friends, I've been really close friends with, almost my whole life. He grew up with me, a little bit older than I am. He was diagnosed with colon cancer a couple of years ago, and at the same time, another good friend of mine was diagnosed with colon cancer within a couple weeks of each other, and they're both model railroaders. Adam, my friend Adam, it was funny. It was we cruised around all the time. He was known as Big Adam, and I was Little Adam because I was a lot littler then, and I'm a lot bigger than he was now. But so it's kind of funny. Everybody still calls me Little Adam. I'm 6'3", 305 pounds, but they still call me Little Adam.
Right.
Anyway, Adam passed away earlier this year. My other friend John, who has colon cancer, he's still doing okay. He moved back home into Oregon with his family. He helped found the company Exact Rail, actually.
Really?
Yeah, and is still in contact with those guys, Blaine Hatfield and them. I think you have talked with them.
Yeah.
Or yeah, good guys. Anyway, so right after my friend Adam's funeral, about 2 weeks later, my sister-in-law was diagnosed with breast cancer, and my wife freaked out and decided that she needed to get checked, and found out that she ended up having it as well. So it's been a heck of a year.
Yeah. Holy moly. And your daughter, what did I say about your daughter there?
Oh yeah, she ended up having a little bit of kidney issues for a little while, so it kind of put a hamper on dealing. My wife kind of forgot about her problems to take care of my little girl, and we finally got through a lot of her medical problems, so now we can concentrate on my wife again. And she's scheduled for surgery toward the end of this month, so
Oh yeah.
hopefully we get it all taken care of.
Yeah, we got to stop doing all this cancer stuff and people getting sick because it's not that much fun.
No, it's you hear about it, you live around it, but you never fully embrace it until it hits you.
Yeah.
You never. It doesn't. I mean, it sucks. There's no doubt about it. There's nothing more horrible in the world than the word cancer. But you find out that there is as soon as it's associated with somebody you're really close to.
Yeah, I know. That's what happened to me. It's like I was going along tickety-boo, thought I was a real humanitarian, and then realized I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
But so anyways, but there are a lot of good things have happened to me through it. And one of the things was we ended up making contact with each other. So then, then we talked on Skype for a bit, and I discovered you are just like a very, very cool guy that people are going to want to listen to on my podcast.
Well, I appreciate that.
Trust me. So how old are you?
I'm 34. I'm coming up on 35.
All actually. Right. So you're just a young guy, and how did you get started in the hobby?
Oh man, well, I grew up with railroaders as not only friends but family. Working on the railroad, obviously, I was never able to really work on the railroad at a young age. Though I did start. We'll get to that in a second. But so obviously I started playing with trains. I model trains was as close as I could get to working on the railroad. I worked on my own little railroad, and my biological father, he was an engineer for the Houston Belton Terminal and later the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad. When he met my mom, we ended up moving back to Utah, so he left that and ended up working for a state transportation company in Utah. Right. I was born. He stayed in the hobby. He played with trains himself. And we went to our local hobby store for years. It was a little store called Well Trained in Provo, Utah, where my friend Adam, who passed away earlier this year, he worked. And my fast forward a handful of years, my stepfather owned the hobby store. So it was kind of funny. I used to go down there and hang out all the time on Tuesday nights and on the weekends and just hang out at the hobby store. It was a big hobby store. It had a huge HO model railroad. And it was just heaven. It was awesome for a 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid to hang out.
And what was it called? What was it called again?
It's called Well Trained.
All right.
If you look at some of the older model railroader magazines from the late 80s, early 90s, you can there's definitely advertisements in the back of it for it. But anyhow, as my parents, they as bad luck has it, they ended up splitting up, and during that time I was spending a lot of time down at the hobby store, and my mom I'd ride the bus down there from school.
Right.
And my mom would come pick me up on the way home from work. Well, Greg, my stepdad, and my mom, that's pretty much how they met. Like they'd talk about how I was doing and what was going on. And so my mom ended up seeing Greg, the owner of the hobby store, every Tuesday and every weekend because they're picking me up. And next thing you know, is Greg started coming home. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, man. It's like, wow, check this out. Next thing I know, I had my own hobby store. So yeah, and he's been my stepdad. He's been my father, my dad, my biological dad, Ray. He passed away in 2005.
Right.
But my stepdad's still my stepdad. Greg, he's still there. We're going down to Chama on Monday, and he's still a big part of the hobby, and has taught me just about everything I know. And it's just kind of blossomed into life. It's what we do, you know.
Wow.
I took it to a different level, and I decided when I was 18, I either needed to go to the military or the railroad, and I chose the railroad.
Right. So
And been there ever since.
So you started working for the railroad when you were 18?
Well, professionally, yeah. I started working for the Heber Valley Railroad when I was 13 years old, working in the shop, kind of as a little gopher. I'd run tools here and there, and I'd sweep things, sweep the shop and clean up. And I started up there with Adam. Adam had his driver's license. He was a few years older than me, and we used to go up there. And he worked up there pretty much all summer. I just tagged along with him all summer, every summer. And I started working up there on a tourist line. They had a couple steam locomotives, and by the time I was about 15 years old, I was firing. I was a fireman on the Heber Valley Railroad, and by the time I was 16, I was running steam locomotives. So it's always kind of been a thing. I worked up there pretty much on the weekends and every summer ever since I was about 13 years old. But when I turned 18, I decided that I needed to, get a real job. So I went to work for Burlington Northern Santa Fe out of Gillette, Wyoming, and within a year became an engineer for them. I was an engineer for the BNSF at 19 years old. And,
wow.
And just kind of stuck with it ever since. I ended up was able to move back to Utah when the Utah Railway got some contracts with the BNSF. When all the big mergers happened, the BNSF was granted trackage rights into Utah. So instead of running their own trains, they kind of just contracted with the Utah Railway, and that created a huge hiring. And so I was able to go straight from BNSF right back into Utah Railway.
So, all right. So let's back up a little bit here. So so what was your father-in-law's name, or your stepdad's name?
Greg Hardy.
Okay. So how did he end? What happened that he ended up closing the store?
It was that, it ended up being a couple of, he had a business partner, and I believe he split. He decided that he was going to take off and do his thing. So my dad took off his part of the store and tried to keep it going. But that was right at the time when the internet was getting huge, and
right.
It was just a really weird time in the hobby itself. Internet sales started picking up, and also the urban development where my dad's hobby store was kind of growing. So the rent just went through the roof, and it just couldn't justify it anymore. So it kind of just shut down, shut it down. And
okay.
But all the inventory stayed in our basement, so we had a hell of a collection for a long time.
Yeah, because I when I typed in well-trained model railroad store in Provo, Utah, this club came up, the Orford, Tintic, and Western.
Yeah, the Orford, Tintic, and Western was founded by Adam Eastman, my friend that just passed away earlier this year. I had a group of guys, and I was the youngest member. We were all there from the get-go. It's still an active organization. It's a modular club that goes to a lot of the local shows. I'm not necessarily a part of any clubs anymore. I kind of grew out of the club scene, kind of a lone wolf type of guy now. But yeah, we were all. It was a good time, man. The early '90s was probably right before I could drive. It was some of the best times of my life, just in the hobby, in railroading in general. I mean, I was playing with real steam locomotives. I was playing with model locomotives. We were chasing trains on Soldier Summit. I remember going up there watching trains up on Soldier Summit, just saying one day I'm going to run trains on here, and I do. I did. I worked for Utah Railway, ran coal trains over Soldier Summit for quite a few years, and now I take the California Zephyr back and forth once a week over Soldier Summit still. So
that's crazy. I can't believe all the stuff you've done. So the Heber Valley Railroad, that's what you called it, right?
Yeah.
And how big is it?
It's a branch. It's an old branch line off of the Rio Grande. It came out of Provo and went all the way up to Heber. The remaining part that the Heber Valley Railroad runs is they're based out of Heber, Utah,
Right.
and they run down Provo Canyon to Vivian Park. It's about 18 miles
Wow.
one way. Yeah, it's about 18 miles. So if I remember right, something like that.
So when you were a kid of like 15, so this is going back like what, 20 years ago roughly.
Yeah.
So in the late 90s, you were helping out on the weekends, steaming trains and just hanging out and cleaning up and all that stuff.
Yep. Yep.
And then from there, you managed to get hired on by the BNSF at the age of 18.
Yeah, I didn't. I got my GED in halfway through 11th grade. Worked with my dad. He opened up a Mustang restoration shop, Ford, classic Mustang cars, the Ford Mustangs.
Holy moly!
I worked with him that summer, and then that fall, I applied and got hired. And so my senior year of high school, I spent on the railroad.
Wow. Now GED. So this show has actually been downloaded almost 250,000 times in about 80, 90 countries around the world. So what is GED for those of us who aren't, for those of the listeners that aren't situated in the United States? What's the GED?
It's a high school equivalent. It's the general education diploma is pretty much what it is. It's just a high school equivalent.
Right, and you had that by the time you were halfway through grade 11.
Yeah, I was kind of forced into it. I didn't really. I wasn't really a good student, I guess. I had other agendas.
Yeah. I know that. I know that story. Maybe that's why we're getting along so well.
Good chance.
Yeah, when I graduated, there weren't any high end universities looking for my. They said, no, you don't need to go to school anymore. You can stop doing this.
Yeah. That's kind of how it went with me. I remember one day I'd take all my tests. I'd show up just enough to go to school. I mean, I wasn't dumb.
Right.
I just didn't like go to school. My parents are really big into history. I love railroad history. Railroad history is one of my, I can't get enough of the history of the railroads and stuff. And so I've always been oriented for that kind of stuff and math. I do a lot of machining. You can't work on steam locomotives without having some machining skills, and that's 100% mathematics. And so everything I did was practical, but I just hated sitting at a desk and doing it.
Sure.
And, yeah. So I remember one day they told me, we don't know why you're cheating. You got to be cheating. You're passing all your classes, but you're never here. And I said, well, I take all the tests. That's all that matters, right? And they said, no. You got to be here. And I said, well, why? I'm passing. And they said, well, we think you're cheating. So they ended up sitting me in a room and had me take this test, and I passed this test. And they said, well, I guess you're not cheating. So you can either take your GED, which is they kind of just had me take it and
right
to see. And they said, well, you can either take your GED and just run, never come back, or you can just keep doing what you're doing. So I said, well, hell, see ya.
So and then from there, so how does an 18-year-old, did you see an ad? Before we go on to that, so your dad started a Mustang restoration business?
Yeah, kind of pretty much right out of the hobby store. The other hobby that we've had is automobile restoration and big time Mustang guys. So he kind of decided to do that, and he did that for quite a while. He did that all the way up until the 9/11. That kind of shut that down. Nobody'd spend money on anything anymore, and that kind of put the kibosh on that business pretty quick. For a minute, if we could have got through that year or two, everything came back, but it got pretty bad for a while. But I got into that. I started doing Mustangs. I've done Mustangs on the side for quite a while, but I started there that year between high school and the railroad. And that was it was fun. It was good times.
Yeah, and I saw in a video by the fella called the Toy Man. You're still doing that, so we'll get on that. We'll talk about that in a bit. So I'm still fascinated by this. 18-year-old gets hired by the BNSF. So did you see an ad in the paper or something? No,
I just knew I had to do something, and as much fun as it is working with your dad, it's not as, we argued a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
the same people, we just argued all the time, and
Yeah.
and it didn't become fun anymore. I still, trust me, to this day, me and him can't work on cars together because we have two different approaches on how things are supposed to be done, and we end up just we
Right.
eventually get things done, but it's not as quick as it would if we were by ourselves. But
Yeah. I know.
so I said, you know what, I really want to do something. I want to do something. I'm 18 years old. I got to get out of here. I got to go see the world, and so I moved to Gillette, Wyoming.
So where is Gillette, Wyoming in relation to Provo, Utah?
Oh, it's about 13 hours or so northeast. It's up by South Dakota, right up in the northeast corner of Wyoming.
Okay. All right.
Really close to like Sturgis, South Dakota.
I was going to say, I think I've been through Gillette on my motorcycle when I go to Sturgis.
Yep, Sturgis is right there.
Yeah, because in Wyoming they used to have No Panty Wednesday in some little town not far from the Devil's. What's the big tower there? And the big rock tower.
Devil's Tower, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that is what it's called.
Yeah, I think so. Not sure.
Yeah, there's a little town there where they had No Panty Wednesday. Not that I would ever go, of course, but
hey, we're here.
Yeah. So
while in Wyoming.
So did you go to Gillette because of the BNSF, or you went to Gillette before that?
I went to Gillette 100% for the BNSF, and that's, in fact, probably the only reason to go. That's just where the job was. I burned up that town pretty quick. Wasn't really much there.
Right.
Just the railroad and coal mines. That's right in the middle of the Powder River. So not only when I started railroading in the world's heaviest tonnage railroad at the time. So it was pretty interesting. It was the most interesting part about it was going from a 1903 Baldwin steam locomotive to a 2000 EMD SD70. It was completely just a big time warp.
Yeah, no kidding.
So it was pretty interesting.
And so were you were a conductor? Is that what you ended up being at the first?
Yeah, I hired out as a conductor. The process at the time, and it's still pretty similar, is you get hired, you got about 6 months of rules and testing and on the job training, and just overall just learning how to railroad, and which is about half and half on the job training and classroom work.
Right.
And then I worked for about 3 months as a marked up conductor on coal trains, just pretty much rode coal trains in the Powder River. Okay. And I saw the ad they posted for engineers out of Alliance, Nebraska.
Okay.
And I put in for it. I said, well, might as well go for it. It's what I want to do. And I put in for it, and by the time I got it, I ended up getting it. They sent me off to Overland Park, Kansas, which is the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Training Center for engineers, and I went through their engineer program, and by the time I hit my 1-year seniority mark, which was also my 19th birthday, I was an engineer for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe.
Holy moly. That just blows me away. That they were that, I don't know, the wrong word is desperate, but you just wouldn't think they'd be putting 19-year-olds in front of a lot of tonnage.
Oh, you ain't kidding, man. I remember the very first time I ever got on a train. Well, obviously, looking back at it, I was like, what the hell were they thinking? But at the time, I was like, man, this is awesome.
Yeah.
This is cool. I look back and see some of the pictures of me when I was, literally, it sounds weird to say just a kid. I still feel like I'm just a kid, but
yeah, I understand.
I see pictures of myself on these trains as an engineer, and I'm like, what in the hell were they thinking?
Yeah.
Because I just look like a baby, man. I just look like this little kid. I could barely even grow a beard. I couldn't barely grow a mustache at the time, and I was an engineer for the railroad.
And probably most of the conductors you worked with were older than you.
And they were, and that was hell. I mean, those guys had a lot of hate and discontent for for the railroad in general, that's just kind of what happens. It's sad, but it's what happens with the railroaders. But yeah, I'll tell you what, you have a young wet behind the ears engineer that's, you know, really, really young, and you have a conductor that's been there for 35 years. They're not too nice to you.
No, I can't imagine they would be. Like, you can just, it just would immediately, this isn't going to go well. I mean,
no, I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, you know, and which ended up, I think, making me a lot better engineer in the long run. But let's just say it was really rough for the first year or two.
Yeah. So you stayed with the BNSF for how long then?
I stayed there for a few years anyhow, till my first daughter was born, about 2005. At the same time as my dad passed away.
Right.
Biological father.
Yeah.
When that happened, when my daughter was on the way, I decided, you know what, I want to spend more time at home. So I took off and tried to short lines, you know, littler railroads. I thought it would be better for the home life. And, which it was for a minute, you know, the money wasn't as good, but, and I bounced around the country trying to find a good short line to work for that was, you know, decent management and good pay. And I worked for quite a few little short lines all over the country. Well, the Western United States anyhow.
Right.
Ended up up in Oregon at the Portland and Western, which was a Genesee and Wyoming company. And at the time, the girl I was with at the time, my kids' mom, she finally got really, really tired of bouncing around the country and got really homesick.
Right.
So she just up and left and went back to Utah, and I didn't know what to do at the time. So Genesee and Wyoming just bought the Utah Railway. So I was like, man, maybe it'd be pretty easy to get back home. And sure enough, it was. I was able, at the time, I put in for a bunch of different options. It was the first time I applied for Amtrak. It was in 2007.
Right.
And I was hired as an engineer out of Portland, but at the same time, I was hired. Utah Railway said that I could come down there. The goal was to get back to Utah.
Right.
So I just took off with Utah Railway and went and experienced that for a while, which was really cool because I finally made my goal was to run trains off Soldier Summit, and I finally was able to. So it was kind of hey, I can come back to Utah, get my family back together, and I can achieve one of my goals. So it was a win-win, and I'm really happy I did it. It would be nice to have that engineer seniority with Amtrak right now, but you know, I ended up with Amtrak anyway, and one of the best things that ever happened to me. And you know, I can't. I look back at it all, and I wouldn't change one thing, man. I wouldn't change anything at all.
Man, you could write a book already. I mean, I bet you there's guys out there drooling all over themselves just thinking, man, what a cool story this guy's got. So you were telling me, though, you kind of got burned out of railroading for a while, though.
You know, when you're, it happened with, it's happened on a couple hobbies, like even with the Mustangs, you know, I learned when your hobby becomes a job, it's not so much your hobby anymore. And especially when you overindulge in it.
Yeah.
It's like with you don't really have a choice. You get called to go to work, you go to work, and it's not so much a hobby anymore. It's a job. And you end up, when you spend that much time on a train every single day, so the last thing you want to do is come home and play with trains.
Yeah.
You know, so I did I stopped. I never stopped collecting. You know, I always knew that one day I would build a railroad. And so when things came out, you know, I've always been into N scale. I've actually been into every scale. I'm not going to lie. I've done a little bit in everything, but I always liked the challenge of N scale. N scale was small. I have a little bit of a OCD perfectionist complex that I want things to be as perfect as possible, or as close to perfect as possible, on very many different areas, not just, you know, details and models, but history and,
right,
you know, everything, every aspect of it. And I thought, you know, N scale, when I first started seeing some of the, you know, more higher level of quality in N scale, it struck me, and I've never stopped, which was nice because moving all over the country collecting N scale was really easy.
Yeah, it packs up pretty small.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd say pretty close to, 9 years, I didn't really do much in the hobby except buy stuff. And I remember one day when I finally got back into it, when I, fast forward and get back to Amtrak, when I started working with Amtrak, the job wasn't quite as demanding as it was when I was working in freight, and it allowed me to really enjoy the hobby again. I remember opening up the boxes that we had, and I was like, oh my Lord, where did I get all this?
Yeah.
And so I said, I've got to do something with it. I've got to build a railroad. I've got to do something. And so just this, earlier this spring, me and my wife, we finished our house, our first house. We right in the mouth of Spanish Fort Canyon, at the base of Soldier Summit, little town called Mapleton, Utah.
Right.
And I have a room for a railroad, and I'm currently building Soldier Summit in N scale, modeling the Rio Grande as of 1953.
Oh, that would be cool. That's a cool time, 1953.
Yeah, it's a little bit later than I really wanted to do. I really wanted to do more of the pre-war, but the one thing about N scale that is hard to overcome is steam locomotives.
Yeah,
steam locomotives. They're coming a long ways, but unfortunately, to do anything in Rio Grande, it requires a massive amount of scratch building, kit bashing, and I just, I'd rather spend my time doing other things, which is why I kind of moved up to 1953 to kind of incorporate a lot more diesel stuff. So
you're what, like about an hour south of Salt Lake City then?
Yeah, 1 hour south of Salt Lake.
And do you work out of Salt Lake City on the Amtrak?
I do. Salt Lake City's my home terminal.
So how does that work then? With a 28-hour layover, how many times a week do you have to do this run?
I do 2 runs a week.
All right.
So my schedule is Wednesday night, I go into Salt Lake and get on train number 5 westbound from Salt Lake City to Winnemucca, Nevada. I spend the day, all day Thursday, and come back Thursday night, and get back into Salt Lake City early Friday morning, and then Saturday morning I go to Salt Lake early in the morning and leave on train number 6, the eastbound Zephyr, and lay over in Grand Junction, Colorado till Sunday night and head back home. So I have I end up having Monday, Tuesday, most of Wednesday, and Friday off.
Okay. Monday, Tuesday, and most of Wednesday and Friday off. Okay. And so you get to spend a fair amount of time at home that way then. Yeah,
which is, like I said, that much time away from the railroad made me start enjoying the little trains again.
Yeah, and how long have you been with Amtrak now?
I just rolled around 6 years.
Oh, okay.
No, 5 years. Sorry, 5 years.
5 years.
I hired out this just about a month after my daughter was born, my youngest daughter. So it's 5 years.
And that's as a conductor.
Uh-huh.
And do you have any desire to end up as an engineer on Amtrak, or are you happy with where you're at? Or,
I spent 12 years as an engineer, and just by default, I figured that's what I was going to do. I was going to come back over to Amtrak and go through the process, start as a conductor and go back to engine service, and then I it's funny because I used to, working on the freight railroad and seeing Amtrak all the time, we used to kind of chuckle and tease the conductors on Amtrak for having to wear a funny suit and a funny hat, and
right,
and now I fully embrace it, man. I think it's the coolest thing in the world. It's in fact it's the nicest clothes I own is the suit that I wear to work, and I there's something about it. It's cool, man. It's kind of magical. It's kind of it's timeless. It's iconic. Everybody looks at you and they know who you are. And it's fun. It's fun dealing with the people. It's fun being in charge of the train. It's I know what it's like to be an engineer. It's 12 hours or on freight. It was 12 hours in a rolling outhouse with a guy you didn't like, and you couldn't get away from it. But on the train, it's you got all sorts of people. You meet I've met some of the coolest people on the train.
Yeah.
I've met some of the strangest people on the train. I've all types, and it took me about a year into it. I decided, you know what, man, I like this. I like being the conductor. Conductor's kind of cool.
Yeah, like you say, being the conductor on on the California Zephyr would be magical and timeless and iconic, and yeah, like you'd say, one day, yeah, I can see how one day all of a sudden you kind of say to yourself, you know what, this is cool being the conductor on the California Zephyr.
Yeah, there's really something to it. It's not just, and I mean, I don't even look at it as just like a job anymore. It's like, it is something. I am somebody, I mean, I always was. I was an engineer, or I was this.
Yeah.
I'm right there in the public eye. Like, I'm right there. I'm dealing with people. I'm helping people. I'm, helping. One of my favorite things about the job, honestly, is what I remember as a kid is just always fantasizing about, oh, what would it be like to do this, or what would it be like to do that, and knowing that I couldn't do it because I was a kid, and I see these kids all the time, and I look at them, I'm like, that was me.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to be able to like have the opportunity to show these kids or even grown. I mean, when I say kids, these kids are anywhere from 3 years old to 100 years old.
Yeah.
And it does. I've seen the same look on the face of a 80-year-old man as I do on a 5-year-old kid when you say, "Hey, you want to go see the engine?"
Wow.
It's that face doesn't change, and to me, that's one of the coolest things about the job.
Yeah, it sounds like you're like the perfect guy for the job. I mean, you've had the history of being all over the railroads and all over, and you've always had a love of the railroad, and your dad having the hobby shop and the whole 9 yards. I mean, you sound like you're the perfect guy. You sound like you're the magical guy in a storybook almost, And yeah, it sounds very, very cool to me. I mean, when I first talked to you, I'm going to tell everybody on the podcast. I mean, when I first talked to Adam, within 5 minutes, I'm thinking to myself, this guy is going to be great to talk to because you have a lot of life in your voice, and like you say, you think the job is cool, and then you're glad you're doing it, and yeah, it's just one of those things. You've managed to land in something that means something to people. Everybody knows. Everybody respects the conductor on a passenger train. Everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, it's a cool job, man. Like, I honestly am really blessed for everything that's happened to me and where I'm at and what I can do, and I mean, it still is a job, and sometimes it gets to me, and sometimes I don't want to go to work.
Sure, absolutely.
But at the end of the day, there's nothing else I'd rather do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, if we go back to the cancer for a minute, we don't want to dwell on that too much, but it's kind of like, it's like, you're saying, you're so thankful for where you are, and you've had your share of problems and troubles and along the way, and it's like, you get to when you realize when you enjoy life that much, you get to see it from a whole different outlook.
Oh yeah, man. I've just in this last couple of years of, I mean, it really started for me, really valuing life. I mean, it sounds kind of odd, but watching, my dad had a stroke. My biological dad had a stroke in 2005 and didn't make it.
Yeah.
But right then I was like, holy crap. I realized there's a lot of things that my dad didn't get to do that he wanted to do, that he had every ability to do, but just didn't.
Yeah.
And he was really good at talking about it, but just
right.
for whatever, but he was also really good about having an excuse of why he didn't do this or why he didn't do that. And I think honestly, the best lesson I learned from him is when he died is don't wait, man.
Yeah.
I mean, cause you don't know, like you obviously can't take anything with you. Hopefully you have the memories, but honestly, just don't wait. Don't wait. Take care of the people you love and you're close to, but don't wait, man. Do what you want to do.
I know. It's like, like my deal was I'm only saying this because you and I haven't really, met, but I mean, my deal was, like 3 years ago, I was told, 6 to 8 months, good luck, buddy, you're going to need it. And then I went to a big hospital in Toronto. I live just north of Toronto, and there's a world-class cancer research hospital there. And I went there, and they put me on a clinical trial, and blah blah blah. And part of the whole deal, being on a clinical trial, was I had to see a psychiatrist, because they do all sorts of tests on you all the time, because you've basically agreed to be a lab rat. And about a year ago, not even a year ago, yeah, probably about a year ago, I'm walking down the street towards the hospital just for one of my regular meetings and appointments, and I'm thinking to myself, I gotta be like the luckiest guy on the friggin' planet. And then I thought to myself, how the heck can you say that to yourself when with all you've been through over the last 2 years? And it's like you just get a whole different appreciation for what's going on around you. It's probably why. Yeah. It's probably why you like being it's probably why you realize, how cool it is to be a conductor. So, how's your end scale layout coming?
Well, I just started this summer. It's coming along quite nicely, actually. It's slower than most because I am into that fine scale aspect of the hobby, so everything's got to be really quite perfect, as perfect as I allow anyhow. So I was going to hand lay the whole thing, which sounds crazy, and I finally decided that I want to run trains. I need to get this done. So I accepted the fact that I'm probably not going to be able to hand lay all of it. So I settled on using microengineering flex track code 55 for all the main lines, and but I still have to hand lay something because that's just I've always loved building switches and hand laying track, and so everything else will be hand laid in code 40. All my switches are built. I don't use commercial switches. I build all my switches.
Wow.
So it's coming along as quick as it can for doing that much work. Like, what I do is I spend a lot of, I like spending time with my kids and my family. And
sure.
So when I'm at home, I don't really do a whole lot of end scale modeling. I'll install things on the railroad, but it's usually late at night when the kids are asleep or something, when they're all doing whatever, they're at school or whatnot.
Yeah.
Most of my building is actually in Grand Junction, like right now. I have my whole workbench set up right in front of me right now. I just built 3 signals, GRS style signals for the railroad, and I built every switch that I've put in so far here in Grand Junction.
Really?
Yeah, pretty much everything I've built right here. Switches, signals, kits, whatnot. So I just transport it on the train.
So you have some sort of traveling workbench?
I do.
And so how hard was it to learn how to get your traveling workbench together? Like, was it trial and error kind of thing?
Yeah, I've forgotten a lot of things before, like I've gotten over here and said, man, I forgot solder, or I forgot this, or I forgot this. And a lot of times here at the hotel, we're at the same hotel every trip. Every time we come here, we're at the same one. So they give us a storage room, and I actually have portable stuff a little locker in the storage room that I keep stuff. I got a little air compressor over here. I've got some airbrush. I got a lot of things over here that I don't have to continually pack back and forth. But I do pack a lot of things back and forth that all my projects go back and forth, obviously. And then there's certain tools that I don't want to buy 2 of because they're kind of expensive. So I'll bring those back and forth. But it took about a year to figure out what to bring and how to bring it. And I actually use a little fishing box, a little tackle box type of thing that has it's a fabric tackle box, but it has a lot of like the plastic organizer trays on the inside. So I have a plastic organizer tray for just about everything. So say I want to build switches, I've got one organizer tray that has all my fast track stuff in it, solder, jigs, templates, whatnot. That kind of goes anything that's kind of turned into my soldering kit. So I keep all my soldering stuff with that. I've got a container for decoders. If I'm going to do decoders, I just grab that one and go. I've got one for painting. I've got one for weathering. So it's kind of what ends up happening is when I get home, I just lay it all out.
Yeah.
And it's right there on the layout and all these little plastic containers, little organizing trays, and it works out really nice.
Yeah, it probably doesn't take you very long to pack it up when you're heading out.
No, not at all.
And so when you say fast tracks, are you using their fixtures?
You know, I do use their fixtures quite a bit. I've gotten away from actually using a lot of the aluminum jigs and fixtures that they do. I kind of just do mine by hand now. I still use their frog fixture. But I've built so many switches over the years with fast tracks equipment that I've gotten to the point where I don't really need them anymore. I use their templates quite a bit. They're print off templates,
right?
But I like to build switches to fit exactly what I want. So just a standard switch, a number 8 left hand or number 8 right hand. It's too rigid. I like to bend it. I like to have a weird kink in it,
right?
Or, so just to make it look a lot more authentic. The railroad builds a switch. One of the nice things about working for the railroad is I see all the dumb stuff they do.
Yeah.
And how it's not what we do as a modeler. I see that if they need something, they'll get it done. They'll make it work. And so that's what I do. And nothing is uniform. Everything's kind of custom and one-off.
Well, I'm talking about Lex Parker. He builds all his switches in place and to fit whatever he's doing. Like he doesn't.
And that's just like the railroad, that's what they do.
Yeah, like he says he has no two turnouts on the layout that are the same.
Yeah, I don't think I do either. Maybe in the staging yard, but that's about it.
Right. Wow. And how big is this layout going to be?
It's 2 bedrooms, so it's probably about 24 by 15.
Okay.
Or so.
Yeah, I guess they don't have basements in Provo, Utah, do they?
Oh no, we do. It's down in the basement.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. That's why the first time we Skyped, it kept cutting out because I was down there.
All right. So that's interesting because it's fascinating to talk to people all around the country. Because some places there's just like, no, we don't have basements there, and other places, see, I would have guessed Provo or the Utah wouldn't, but so most houses in Utah do have basements then.
Yeah, it's pretty common. I remember growing up, everybody had a basement.
Yeah.
I remember first time I saw a house without a basement, I thought, man, that's weird. Kind of weird.
Yeah. And I wonder why, because Utah, the winters aren't that tough, are they in Utah?
They can be.
Okay.
I mean, they can be pretty bad.
All right.
Up in the mountains, they get pretty deep. Snow gets pretty deep. Down in the valleys, it seems like it's not. Back when I was little, I used to think, man, we got so much snow. It's as tall as I am. But then I realized I'm only like 2.5 feet tall.
All right. So you say 2 bedrooms, but it's in your basement. So you have bedrooms in your basement, do you?
Yeah. My both my daughters and my son have a room in the basement. So I part of the railroad actually runs through my son's room. He thinks that's pretty cool.
I would think so, yeah. And okay, so now I want to talk to you about the 3D printing.
Oh, yeah.
Like you're pretty, and also you have other. We can't forget to talk about. You also have, before we do the 3D, after we do the 3D printing, you have. Did you say you have live steam?
Yeah, we do.
Of course you do. All right, so let's get on to the 3D printing because you're pretty into that.
I part of doing the Rio Grande and N scale meant that I have to build a lot of models that aren't commercially available, and I cannot. I mean, for me personally, I just can't take a model and paint it and say, well, this is what it is. Well, no, I used to scratch build a lot of stuff in N scale, but that that's pretty tedious and stuff. And then when 3D printing came out, or when I learned about it, I don't know what the correlation is to when it actually was available to the public and when I got into it. But when I first realized that, hey, I can draw this up on the computer, which I'm not good at all. I usually, hire somebody that is good. I have one of my partners in the live steam business that we have is fantastic at 3D modeling, and he he does a lot of work for me. I've had other people do some work for me, but I'm really good at drawing pen and paper, pencil and paper.
Right.
I just cannot use a computer to save my life. So, I've usually will draw the plans and send it to somebody who can do the work, or my partner Roy will do them. And then we just shapeways it. And I've got, proper cabooses. I've got passenger cars. I've done quite a few things in Rio Grande. I got a Shapeway store. It's called the Prospector. What's it called? Prospector Models. Yeah.
Right.
A lot of the stuff that I've done for my railroad is available there. Mostly Rio Grande stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, it's all Rio Grande stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, 3D printing. It's from where I started in 3D printing to where we're doing now is insane, because when we started doing the 3D printing, when Dale Angel's a really good friend of mine, he's the Toy Man Television on YouTube.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome videos. If you're ever bored, he comes out with a new video every Sunday. But anyhow, he came down and did a video on 3D printing, and from just last year when that video came out, when I was just doing N scale, we're now doing pattern making for 2.5-inch scale live steam with 3D printing. So it's a technology that's absolutely amazing. I don't know enough about it to really do it justice to talk a lot about it. I know what we do with it, but I couldn't imagine. I couldn't do a lot of the things that I do without it. That's for sure.
Holy moly! So how long have you been into the 3D printing then?
Oh, just a couple years. About 2 or 3 years.
And do you sell much stuff on Shapeways?
It's paid for itself. Like, cause I pay people to do some of the drawings and, for me. Cause like I said, I just can't, for some reason, I can't draw a straight line on a computer. I don't know why, but I just can't. So I've made my money back. I'm not upside down in it by any means, but, it's when you start doing one-off models of things, it takes a certain person or very particular person to buy them. So they have to definitely be interested and want that model as much as I did to justify
for sure,
it.
Yeah.
So.
But it's been worth your while to do it then.
Oh, it would have been worth my while if I never sold a Model 1.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, as I want my model railroad, my N-scale railroad, to be as historically accurate as possible from every detail, from the scenery to the models to everything. And that without 3D printing, it would have been really hard to do.
So I saw like in the Toyman video, you were working on a caboose. And so how long would it take Shapeways to print that caboose out for you?
So if you clicked buy it, I purchased the caboose. It's usually about 2 or 3 weeks, and it will show up on your doorstep.
Okay. And what is Shapeways exactly? Like, where is it?
That's a good question. I think it's, from what I understand, it's a worldwide company, and they have different offices or shops in different locations. I think there's a few of them throughout the world.
Right.
And when you order something, it just goes to the closest one to you, which I think for me is somewhere in the East Coast, if I remember right.
All right.
But it's just kind of a 3D print shop that I have no idea. It might as well be the North Pole for all I know.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what I like to talk about magical. Like, everybody knows of Shapewear. Lots of people know of Shapeways and what it is, but really like, right. It's kind of like it's there, but you never see it.
As far as I know, it's a bunch of jolly elves with a little printer over there.
And have you noticed an improvement in the quality, or is there different qualities you can?
Yeah. Anyhow, what I've noticed is not so much the quality of the prints coming from Shapeways, but the quality of prints coming from local do-it-yourselfers. The printers that you can buy for a couple $1,000s. And yeah, granted, $2,000-$3,000 for a printer is pretty expensive, but considering that when we started this, when they said, "Oh, this printer is about $200,000," it's a big difference.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine here locally in Utah, Corey Bonsall, he has Bonsall car shops, and he started doing some Rio Grande stuff. I begged him to do N-scale drop bottoms for me, correct ones. And he finally did. Finally talked him into it, and I just took delivery of 50 of them.
Wow.
And he printed them off in his living room, as far as I know. So, and that's the biggest thing that I've seen lately is the quality of do-it-yourself printers, you know. And I think that's going to be the new thing is, you know, technology goes up, the prices will come down, and hopefully one day I'll be able to print stuff in my basement, you know?
Yeah, that's like I talk about this podcast. I mean, I'm using equipment now. I mean, I've invested some money in some equipment, but not a ton of money, not a crazy amount of money. And I mean, you know, you can produce stuff right in your own house with the proper equipment. Yeah. It blows you away. You know, I'm driving down the road listening to these podcasts thinking, I can't believe that we've come to a point where you can do this on your own.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
You know, I remember getting a blue box Athearn SD40T2 thinking, man, look at this. And then ordering all the Details West parts and Details Associates and all these things. And here I am now making our own models.
So what did you say your friend's name was? Bonsall Car Shops?
Yeah, Bonsall Car Shops. Corey Bonsall. He's on, I know he's got a Facebook page, the Bonsall Car Shops.
So how do we spell that?
I think it's Bonsall.
All right. Okay. And then when you mentioned Athearn, that was one of the things when we first talked. We got to talk about this. Do you remember saying to me, you said one of the best things that ever happened in model railroading was Irv Athearn?
Oh yeah. I always, the best thing that ever happened to model railroading was Irv Athearn, and the second best thing that ever happened to model railroading is when he passed away. And I say that as the most respect possible. I don't want anybody to send me emails or anything saying you're an ass,
right?
Because I'm not. I am, but I'm not.
Yeah, I gotcha.
He developing the Athearn line, HO scale, shake the box, simple assembly kits, affordable, was huge. I mean, it got people into the hobby. It kept people into the hobby. But at a certain point in time, it never progressed. I mean, and I think everybody saw that through the early 90s, mid 90s to the later 90s. And I think that's sometime right around there is when he passed away. But then you saw Athearn as a company jump forward 100 years.
Right.
I think they came out with their Genesis line right after that.
Yeah.
I mean, just the quality just went through the roof. You know, I mean, in 1997, I think the rubber band drive GE 44 tonner, that little switcher rubber band F units, and I think you could still get those. I think you still could order those from Athearn.
Wow.
In the mid 90s, you know, and I don't think you could find one on eBay now. You know. So
yeah, so you're right. Like, I mean, because of the vision that he had as a younger man to create those blue box kits, I think it helped push the hobby forward. And you're right. You know, I mean, you get older, you kind of get in a rut. And yeah, you know, when the Genesis series came out, then away they went again.
Yeah. You saw them redevelop themselves as a company, which just made every other manufacturer do the same. You know, and then you saw, you know, new manufacturers coming into play, and that just the quality of the models just went through the roof. I mean, we were taught. I remember. I think everybody can relate and remember when a brass model was the top of the line. Man, you had brass, you were something. You know, I mean, not only was it kind of a status symbol, but it also was the best quality you could buy. And now the only people that really have brass is just collectors. It's gone back to a collector's market because the plastic, when it comes to detail, you can't beat some of these models that are coming out.
I know.
You know,
and
it's just insane.
It's scaletrains.com. They raised the bar again.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just seeing what's available now is just, it's almost intimidating as a model builder, because you're like, at one time as a model builder, you were producing some of the highest quality, most detailed models out there. And now you don't have to. And it's, I mean, intimidating as in why do I even spend the time to do this when I can just buy it? You know, I mean, I don't like seeing that, because I used to love, you don't see these anymore. Remember when Model Railroader had articles on how to detail a locomotive? Like you'd have a article, and it would be like, okay, the first ingredient to this kit or this project is an Athearn Blue Box SD40-2.
Yeah,
and then there an entire list of every single detail part that went onto it. Those were my favorite articles ever.
Right.
And I don't think I haven't seen an article like that in years.
Yeah, you're right. They don't do those anymore, but of course everything changes, and now you can print out your favorite caboose for the the Rio Grande on your own. So I mean, everything just changes.
Yep,
constantly.
It does.
So I got two more questions about the 3D printing. You're gonna somehow you're gonna try to print stainless steel passenger cars.
You know, when that was made, when Dale was down there, it was an option, and Shapeways was letting me consider that as a option. But I don't think that technology has gotten here yet. I mean, it wouldn't allow me. Some of the bigger stuff they do have stainless steel as an option to print in, but so the stuff that I'm printing is too fine of a detail that the resolution of the printer doesn't allow it to print stainless steel yet. So at the time, yes, that was the idea, that was the plan, but it didn't go too far.
Okay, and then you were talking about there's a fella in Spain or something you were talking about.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Pedro. He was the one that he was the artist that the designer that did a lot of the drawings for me that sent it off to Shapeways.
And how'd you find him?
Facebook.
Really?
It's kind of a social media thing. Yeah.
So you were just searching Facebook and you found this guy in Spain that was a civil engineer or something?
Yeah, he was just on one of the modeling 3D modeling groups that I kind of got into. You know, I mean you can get a PhD on YouTube now, you know. And so when I decided that this is something I wanted to try to do, I just started researching it as much as I could, and then got into some groups and networking a little bit, and I've met some really good designers, and I met some really bad designers, and Pedro's probably one of the better ones as far as I've ever worked with. When it comes to he's not a model railroader. He's not into trains at all, but he knows he can design well enough that you just give him the pattern or the plans, and he can do it, you know. So which was really cool to me, because here I am talking to a guy, you know, on the other side of the world and saying, this is what I want you to do. Here's the information I've got. And within a couple weeks, having this little model show up at my house that was perfect.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. I mean, I never felt like I was on Star Trek before, but that's about the closest I've ever felt to being on the Voyager.
And do you mind if I ask you what the cost was, or?
To have a drawing done or to print?
To have the drawing done by this fella in Spain.
It kind of depended. It was kind of an hourly thing. So the more detail and the more structured that it had, it cost more. But I don't think I was ever into anything more than a couple $100.
Wow. So it's not out of line.
No. I mean, I completely planned on spending $200 on a brass caboose.
Yeah.
If it ever came out.
Yeah.
You know. So to spend $200 on the drawing and be able to print off as many as I wanted, can't beat that.
Yeah, you can't beat that, exactly. And have you sold any of those on Shapeways?
Yeah, I've sold quite a few, actually. I've sold quite a few cabooses. I've sold quite a few passenger cars.
Wow.
It's kind of fun. With the Shapeways store, you'll have it all set up, and all of a sudden you'll get a little notification on your phone that sounds like money. And it just says somebody bought this, and they pay you once a month, and I never got a check more than maybe $30 or $40 from them, but
but still, yeah,
kind of nice,
Yeah, sure, and it helps to defray the cost of what you did originally.
Right, yeah. To me, it's just cool to see somebody that's interested in what you've done. Enough so that they paid for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the same as this podcast. Like, I started it out strictly as this would be kind of an interesting thing to do. Thought a couple of dozen people would listen to it, and it'd be a fun thing to do, to talk to people, when I started it. And now, like, here I am 3 years later, talking to all kinds of interesting people, and it's like it's more for me than it is for anybody else. But other people along the way get an advantage or of having put some effort into it. So it's just exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. So what's the deal on this Mustang restoration? What's that all about?
Oh, well, my dad, my stepdad, has always been a Mustang guy. I guess the story goes back to 1964 when they came out. My grandma, his mom, won a '64 Mustang at one of the city days.
Wow.
And it's just so it kind of started something. They've been Mustang fans ever since. And so my dad's always had Mustangs. And when he moved in with, when he married my mom, he had Mustangs. And so it just kind of became a thing. Well, we decided one day to, obviously my dad had a hobby store. My dad is the epitome of turning his hobby into a business. And unlike me, where, when I turn a hobby into a business, it ends up not being a hobby anymore. My dad's the exact opposite. My dad ends up with hobbies because of businesses. So
right.
He got into doing the Mustang thing, and that kind of just took off. And I obviously ended up being one of my first cars was a '66 Mustang. I really enjoyed working on them, and at one time I decided that I was going to restore one completely for myself. And working for the railroad, I didn't really have the time to do so. So I looked into having somebody do it for me.
Right.
And I realized how much that was going to cost. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. I better be able to do it myself. So I just started learning how to do it myself. I picked up, my dad taught me so much. And I picked up from where my dad left, and I just kept going, and I got really, really good at it. And ironically, I related it to building models. Obviously, as a model builder, you don't just I didn't just stick to cars. Or trains.
Right.
I think a lot of people, build cars and stuff like that. I just related it to just building a big model. It's just bigger tools and more expensive parts and just looked at it that way, and it worked. It succeeded. I was able to teach myself how to paint cars. I was able to I did everything. It's just a big model.
Yeah, I would see that. I can relate it to that. It's just a big model. I mean, when you build a model, you want it to be pristine. When you build a custom car or restore a car, you want it to be pristine. So it's just the same thing on a bigger scale.
That's just how I looked at it. And obviously with different products, it's different techniques, and I just developed what I needed to do. A lot of practice, a lot of trial and error, and I ended up being really successful at it. And I ended up doing it for people for quite a few years on the side,
right,
to pay for itself. So I have a little Mustang collection, and I got my collection 100% by doing work for other people.
Is there any such thing as a little Mustang collection?
Well, at one time I had 6.
How many do you have now?
I just have 2.
Oh, okay.
2.
You had 6 Mustangs of your own.
I did.
Holy moly. You are like a one-man highlight reel. 30, you're about to turn, would you say 34?
35.
35. You are like a one-man highlight reel. I can't... I have this fella on my show called Shane Mason. He's like 20 years old, and we met by mistake. I screwed up something one day, and he called me on it, and then we became fast friends. And he's the same as you. He's just like this non-stop whirling dervish that gets stuff done, and you're the same kind of guy. I mean, you had 6 Mustangs, and so do you still restore Mustangs?
No. Yes and no. I get asked probably once a week to do work for somebody. I never advertised. It was kind of a word of mouth thing, and it's still going. I get asked all the time my thing is painting. I really got good at painting. And so at least once a week, somebody asks me to paint a car for them, and I like it, but I don't like it. It's kind of one of those things. I had fun. I don't want to burn myself completely out of it, so I need to take a break for a while.
Right.
So I'm moving on to a new venture.
A new venture.
Yeah.
What's that?
2.5 inch scale, narrow gauge live steam.
Wow, 2.5 inch. Isn't the standard? Isn't most people using 7 inch? Don't most people do 7 inch scale?
Yeah, 7.5 inch gauge.
Gauge, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, which makes it 1.5 inch scale standard gauge. 2.5 inch scale makes that same gauge narrow gauge.
Okay. All right, so these are rideable trains then.
Yes.
So the 7 inch gauge, the tracks are 7 inches apart. Is that what that is?
Yes. 7.5 inch. Yeah.
So how far apart are your tracks then?
7.5 inch gauge.
Okay. All right.
But at 2.5 inch scale, that makes that 3 foot. So narrow gauge.
All right. Let me run that one past me again. So, okay. So if somebody I have a fella in Texas called Shane. We call him Shane the Cosmic Cowboy Murphy. He's another one-man highlight reel. He lives in Tyler, Texas, East Texas.
Excellent.
Make sure you get that right. He says it's Tyler, Texas, and he burned a layout once, but that's another story altogether. I've met so many interesting people doing this. So
I bet.
Oh yeah, it's just the greatest thing. I mean, so your tracks. So he is standard gauge, and he calls it 7 inch. Does that make sense to me? Does that make sense? No, maybe.
Well, the standard is 7. You got two standards really. You got 7.25 and 7.5. 7.25 is more correct for like 1.5 inch scale. 7.5 is more correct for the 1.6. It's starting to get really fine at this point.
Right.
But the standard ride-on gauge, the width of the track is 7.5.
Okay. And that's what you're doing narrow gauge of that.
I'm making that narrow gauge at 2.5 inch scale.
Okay, so you're actually building.
They're bigger.
Bigger. All right. And how did you get started on that?
Wishing, hoping, praying. It was one of those things that I always thought was really, really cool. I just didn't think I'd ever be able to afford, which I would never be able to afford this. I've got 4 kids, and I would never be able to afford this if I was just to buy it.
Right.
And my Roy Stevens, a really close friend of mine, we've talked about it for years. We should just start building our own. Yeah, that'd be great. That's what I need is another hobby. But he took off with it, man. He took off with it. He started. He was a big N scaler as well, and he was kind of the one that got me into the 3D printing at first. He did NN3 N scale narrow gauge.
Wow,
he was crazy. He hand laid all his track. He did. I mean, it's kind of where I kind of picked up a lot from him. But he got into. I think he went blind from hand laying N scale narrow gauge track, so he ended up having to go to 7.5 inch gauge. I don't know what really what fascinated him about it, but he ended up doing it, and he ended up starting a company called Ride Trains, just RIDE, Ride Trains, and which kind of supported his hobby,
right?
And so he produces a couple little electric locomotives in 1.5 inch scale, and I never really knew he was doing it. Like, I knew that he kind of got into the riding rail hobby, but I didn't fully understand how much he got into it until one day I went to his house and I was like, "Holy crap, dude! You got a full machine shop in your garage?"
Right?
Like, yeah. I said, "Wow." So I mean, that's like the biggest hurdle of overcoming is having the equipment to do this.
Yeah.
That's the biggest cost is the machining and just the labor in it. And if you have your own machines, well, it drastically reduces that cost. Now you just got to have the knowledge to use them.
Okay, so I understand. I've gone to his page here, these Ride Trains. So really, you're building on the same standard gauge that everybody's using. Only you guys are doing narrow gauge, which makes the trains bigger. It's a bigger scale. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I got it now. Yeah.
So he started with that and got into the hobby, and he's been doing that for a few years now. Well, it was probably about 2 years ago. I was sitting in here in Grand Junction, watching some YouTube videos, and I ran across a guy named Jesse Banning, and he has a shop in Las Vegas called Banning Locomotive Works, and he's my age, and he decided that this is what he was going to do as well. So his full-time job is building steam locomotives, small scale steam locomotives, and is probably has become one of the forefront leaders in the industry. And I've befriended him. Me and him are really close friends now. I probably talk with him 2-3 times a week.
Wow.
And we've just started doing a lot of projects together. What started out as, hey man, I'm interested in buying one of your locomotives, is, hey man, let's produce this locomotive.
Okay.
Last couple of years. So between him and Roy, I've kind of worked myself into a situation where I've learned a lot from Jesse. He has an amazing company, and we're going to hopefully do some work with him. Partnership type stuff. Work on some projects together.
Right.
Scratch each other's back, so to speak. But Roy and I finally decided, you know what? Let's just go all in. Let's just do this. There's only one way to do this, and we just got to start. It's like I went back to that lesson my dad taught me is just, if you want to do something, don't talk about it, just do it.
Yeah, just decide. Just
do it, man. So when Roy and I started talking about it, we started drawing up some plans. He started taking the 3D modeling to a bigger scale. He bought himself some CNC machining equipment, a lathe and a mill,
right?
And in turn has developed programs for his machines to cut all these parts out for us. And in doing so, we decided to take some of the blueprints for some of the Rio Grande narrow gauge and start to produce those. Right now, we're currently working on the K27. We're building 5 of them right now.
Wow.
We just barely cut the first wheels, and we're working on the drivers and frames right now. So it's coming along. I expect to have those done in the next couple years anyway. It's probably going to take at least 2 years to get them fully done. But they're moving. We're cutting metal. We're not talking about it anymore. We're actually doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And are you advertising it anywhere yet, or you're not doing anything?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. We have sold, one of the locomotives is mine. One of them is Roy's. We have sold 2 of them to other people that's kind of seed money, I guess you could say. It's kind of just paying for all of it. And once we actually say, we know we can do it. We just want to be 100% positive that we can do this consistently.
Yeah.
And once we do that, once we have this locomotive to a certain stage, we are going to start diversifying and doing a few more projects and planning our next steam locomotive. The big plan is to obviously build one of every model of the narrow gauge steam locomotives of the Rio Grande. That's like the long-term goal.
Sure.
But as for now, we just want to get this one done and say that we did it.
Well, and the K27 is an iconic locomotive.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm really excited to be able to go down and play with the real one in the next couple days. So.
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, that'll be cool too. And you'll probably you'll be able to hang around it, maybe get a cab ride in the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm not too worried about trying to weasel my way up in there. I've some good friends that work down there on the timbers.
I'm gonna move to Provo, Utah, and just hang out with you.
Do it. You're more than welcome, man. Like when I finally decided to just jump into this 2.5-inch scale thing, I kind of did it. I kind of forced myself to do it because I was still on the fence, just because it's expensive, man. I mean, there's nothing cheap about it.
Yeah.
And so when I was building my house, I actually started planning all the landscaping around a railroad that didn't exist. Like, I didn't really tell my wife what I was doing. I was just kind of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what, if I started, every guy that's in model railroading should love to draw model railroad plans. I want to build a layout. I'm going to build a layout plan.
Yeah.
I don't know how many layout plans I've drawn in my life, but when I took a Google image of my property and started to draw a layout plan on my property, that was a new level, man. I was like, wow, this is cool. And then all of a sudden I saw it. I actually one day woke up and I said, wow, I can do this. This is something that's very doable. I've got right now I have planned about 800 feet of track.
Now, how big is your lot? Like, how much land do you have?
It's just under an acre. It's about just under an acre.
Yeah. So you got enough room to get something out there.
Yeah. It's one big loop. It's just one big loop. Just do something simple. But it all became real when we were pouring the driveway. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I have got to be able to cross the driveway somehow.
Right.
Well, next thing I know is I have steel showing up, and I planned a crossing. When we poured the driveway, I put a crossing in. And I said, well, I guess I'm doing this now. So we just barely planted all our grass. We just barely got all the rough landscaping done, and I trucked in 5 truckloads of crushed rock as subgrade ballast, and we got that spread all the way around. So I've got my subgrade down as well. I also I'm fortunate my dad is into landscaping boulders and such now, so I had to hook up with all that, and we brought in a lot, I think probably 70 tons of boulders, and just started landscaping doing the scenery for my 2.5-inch scale railroad. We dug out a retention pond. I've got a 18-foot bridge that's going across the property.
Wow.
So it's planned out pretty good. All the rail is showing up this spring. So.
Is your wife catching on?
I still don't know if she knows what I'm doing. No, she knows what I'm doing. She shakes her head a lot at me.
Yeah.
She thinks I'm nuts. My neighbors think I'm nuts.
Sure.
But they'll all be wanting rides when I'm going around my yard.
That's the thing, isn't it?
They'll all be that.
They'll all be wanting rides when the thing is. So that's the thing, because because there's a fair amount of work and ambition involved. At first, people think you're nuts, but once you get the thing done, it's like all of a sudden, hey, this is cool.
This is really cool. I've had people stop by like, "What are you doing? Let me see you out here doing this all the time. What are you doing?" And I tell them, and it's amazing. The conversations I've started just because of just wheelbarrowing some rock around has been pretty impressive. And everybody that looks at my driveway is like, "What is this?" And when I tell them, they're like, "You got to be kidding me." No, I'm not. So I show them some videos of what, the big overall plan is. And to show them some videos of Train Mountain and other people that are in the hobby, and they're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Then when you tell them Walt Disney, this is how Disneyland started.
That's right. That's exactly how he was basically a model railroad. That's all you're basically looking at is a giant model railroad.
That's what it is, and it's pretty fantastical.
It is, and yet the crazy thing about it, I mean, I always end up saying on the podcast, model railroading or live steam railroading or rail fanning, it's like belonging to MI6. There's way more people in it than you realize, but nobody knows who they are. Right.
They just come out of the woodwork, man. Everybody loves trains.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, everybody loves trains.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said with this podcast. Like, I never would have guessed in a million years I'd be sitting here 3 years later telling you, oh, yeah, I've got about 250,000 downloads around the world. And I'm thinking, what? And people listen to it all the time, and it's like, it's just that people love trains and love the hobby. They love building things. People generally love building things. Mm-hmm. They like seeing things move. So do you have a shop on your property at all, or?
My previous house, I did. Yeah. I do have a shop in the plan, but I hope to have it all done next spring, summer is my plan is to build the shop. I'm building a like a little fabrication shop to where I can build boilers and and do a lot of the maintenance for the railroad. And also, it's got to be an engine house too. So, I got to have somewhere to park this stuff. So, like, it's just a big engine shop.
Right. And do you guys have any idea what you might end up calling your business at all, or?
Right now, since we've been doing a lot of castings and we've been casting some initials into our pieces. Right now, we're just calling it Adam and Roy Model Engineering, which turns out to be ARME is what you see in some of our castings that we're doing so far.
Okay.
I got I registered a name for when I start doing boilers, building boilers for the hobby. I registered my son's name. In fact, I named my son after one of my favorite locomotives, which is a Mason Bogie.
Wow.
I have a daughter named Shelby for the Shelby Cobra as well. In fact,
that's cool.
Her name's Shelby Coberlin is her name actually. But
wow, that's cool.
So Mason. So the shop name is Mason Boiler Works, MBW.
Okay. And is it like, is there, I don't know what the right word is. Is it dangerous to build boilers? Like, I guess these boilers are so small they wouldn't really ever explode. They'd probably just kind of open up a seam or something if they weren't done right.
I mean, you're still running quite a bit of pressure. You're around 120 pounds, 150 pounds boiler pressure. That's still enough to cause some injury. I mean, that's enough to kill somebody if you're
right.
You know.
Yeah.
But overall, these boilers, they are small and they're over-engineered. You know, so
okay.
They're built to a safety factor of like 5.
Right.
You know, so it's the chances anything's possible. Anything.
Absolutely, I get what you're saying, but they're overbuilt, so something catastrophic would have to happen.
Right.
Yeah. And okay, and so how do you learn how to build a boiler?
Well, going back to when I started in my little career of railroading at the ripe old age of 13 years old,
right,
in steam shop of the Heber Valley Railroad is where it all started. I got a really good foundation there. I kept learning. I researched it. The history behind it all. I couldn't get enough of it. I've read so many books. I've done so many projects. Just a lot of the things that I've done elsewhere in life has kind of all rolled into one. Welding, welding's the key factor in it. And fortunately for me in high school, going back to me being a juvenile delinquent and not going to school as much as I should have, my dad's best friend was my high school welding shop teacher. So of all the classes I had to go to, my welding class is the one I had to go to because my dad, Gordon would just call my dad.
Right.
And to top it off, my Gordon Reynolds, my shop teacher, is a avid ON3 modeler, just like Lex.
Really?
Yeah. So there was always a fascination with the trains. So, I mean, it was a really close connection with my shop teacher and trains and putting it all together. So I really, not only having to go to my shop class because Gordon would just call my dad and my dad would, kick my butt.
Right.
I excelled in it. I excelled in welding. I became pretty good at it. I've taken it to obviously a pretty high level. And I've just been really fortunate to be associated and learn from a lot of some of the best people in the industry. A good, really close friend of mine, John Ramash, was the chief mechanical officer of the Heber Valley Railroad while I worked there. And now he has a business in Cheyenne, Wyoming called Wasatch Railroad Contractors, who that's what they do. They restore locomotives. They build boilers. They do general railroad maintenance. All sorts of stuff right there out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. And, I've just got so many great resources around me that I've tried to learn something from everybody I've ever come in contact to. And by doing so, I have this really well-rounded repertoire of knowledge that I can pick from. So I'm really fortunate. I really, really am. And it's like I said, that lesson I learned from my dad to don't stop, man. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Do it. Don't let life pass you by and just try to do everything you want to do. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. In other words, yeah, like I said, just decide and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, just don't make excuses. It's, I've talked with so many people that I wish I could do that, or I wish I did that, or,
Yeah.
oh, to be able to do that. And it's like, well, why? It would be nice to hear you say that you actually did something instead of wishing that you had,
Yeah.
I said, the difference between you achieving this and you still not doing anything in your life is your train of thought,
And even if you never accomplish your goal, if you're trying to accomplish the goal, at least you know you tried.
Right.
That's the key. Of not even starting is the worst part. If you don't start, you don't even know if you ever could have done it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the key right there is I mean, going back to like just automotive restoration. I don't know how many people have a project in their backyard that one day they'll get around to. Well, guess what? They never will.
Yeah.
It's just sitting there. All you got to do, take the first step, man, pull it into the garage, get it in your way.
Yeah, get it in your way. Exactly. And don't beat yourself up if it's not going as well. Because one of the things I've come to realize is not everybody has the same motor skills. So, if it's not as easy for you as you'd like, well, just slow down, take your time, and do it a little piece at a time.
And the amazing thing is if you're genuine and you really want to learn how to do something, there is plenty of people out there, and they don't even have to live on your same block or in your same city. I mean, I wanted to build 3D models, and I got a guy in Spain to do it for me.
Yeah.
Not only that, but he taught me a lot about what to do and how to do things. I would have never thought I didn't think I'd ever know anybody that lived in Spain or Portugal, wherever.
Yeah, exactly.
Let alone be working with somebody and learning from this guy. I mean, with the way social media is and technology and everything, man, like I said, you can get a PhD off of YouTube.
Well, that's my thing right now. It's like I'm a huge fan of social media. I don't like to hear people complain about it because, as my son says, he's 32, he says, you're carrying around in your pocket something that's more powerful than what took the men to the moon. And it's like, you don't want to just be sitting there looking at cat videos. You want to engage with people.
Right, man.
And that's the beauty of social media. All of a sudden, if you use it, the whole world's your oyster. I mean, look at you and me. We just started talking, and now, we'll probably strike up a friendship as the years go by, and it'll be interesting to follow you and all that stuff. And hopefully I'll get you to paint my Harley,
Absolutely. I'd love to.
And, it's just a cool thing to do. It's cool. So, all right. Last subject we'll touch on is Blaine Hatfield.
Yeah.
I met Blaine when I interviewed him maybe about a year ago now. And he's cool guy.
Yeah.
Philosopher extraordinary. So how do you know him?
My dad's hobby store.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my dad, when I knew of him, I mean, I never had a close relationship or anything. I knew who he was.
Right.
I think he knew who I was. He definitely knew who my dad was. Everybody in the valley knew who my dad was because of in the hobby anyway, because of the store. So when I met John McCauley, my friend that ended up with cancer and moved back to Oregon, when I met John, I met him at a bar, and we just kind of started talking. And next thing you know, it was really funny. It's like we didn't even talk about trains. We just kind of hung out and just had a beer or two together. And then one day I was working for Utah Railway, and I was in the yard switching. And I looked down, and there was John sitting down there in his truck watching the trains go back and forth. And I was like,
wow,
no way. He's a rail fan? So I got off the locomotive, went and talked to him. I'm like, well, are you kidding me, man? What? You didn't tell me you like trains. He says, well, you didn't ask. I said, you're right, I didn't. I was like, I didn't have no reason to. I guess, well, it turns out he likes trains. And our relationship grew right then, instantly. I met him at a bar. We just talked about karaoke and what our favorite beers were. Next thing you know is we both like trains. I work for the railroad, and he moved from Oregon to start the company Exact Rail when they started up in Utah. Well, fast forward through all the trial and tribulation that company went through. Blaine Hatfield ended up at the company,
Right.
and at first I didn't really recognize the name. I knew him, and I talked to my dad. He's like, "Oh yeah, you know Blaine, Oh, okay, I do. Okay." So I ended up I know Blaine. I just kind of one of those things. I've known him for a long time, just never got to know him.
Yeah.
So, and here we are now. Hopefully, he doesn't live too far from me. And they started up they went from exact rail. They're still doing the exact rail thing from what I understand. And I don't follow it too much because they kind of, they're the HO scale, N scale stuff that exact rail doesn't really fall into my time period or such like that. But I think it's phenomenal. I think it's cool as heck that they have a local manufacturer that in the hobby. Not to mention that John, he was the tool guy for exact rail. Like if you ever look at the wood chip car that exact rail did, if you look in the wood grain, you can see JMac in it. That's his initials. He tooled that entire car. He carved every bit of that wood grain in that car.
Wow.
Just really cool stuff. I learned a lot from those guys, about tool and die and what the process is for making models, and just really cool stuff. But that's how I know Blaine. I know Blaine a lot longer than I thought I knew Blaine.
Jeez. And so now, so he's an exact rail and he's still working there, is he? And is he doing something else, or is it just exact rail still?
I think I'm not 100% positive, but they started a storefront in Provo. I think they call it Train Life.
Okay.
And they have a blog. I know for a while it was like an online retail thing, and then one day they opened up a storefront. And the next thing I know is they're importing Pell Solberg's railroad.
Wow. So they're the guys that end up with Pale Solberg's railroad.
Yes.
Wow, that's gonna be cool. That'll be a job and a half.
Yeah, that's gonna be really cool. Because I've obviously never met Pale. I've read all his articles. He's an amazing modeler, and there's no question. What does he live in? Denmark? Something like that?
I think Sweden.
Sweden?
I think so.
Yeah. So, what are the chances of seeing this railroad that's just absolutely phenomenal, that's syndicated, published all over the world, obviously?
Yeah.
And, then you see he starts talking. I follow him on Facebook, and starts talking about having to dismantle it and tear it apart and this and that, and the whole world's shutting down over it. And next thing you know is nobody talks about it anymore. You think, oh crap, it's gone, it's toast. And next thing you know is your buddy down the road says, hey, we got Paul Solberg's railroad coming in, and we're going to be setting this thing up. And you're like, oh man, something I never thought that I would ever see other than in print is now going to be right down the road from me. And I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, it is going to be awesome, and it's fantastic that they're saving it.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It's something that I never thought that I would ever see any of his work. You got people in the hobby, starting with John Allen all the way up to Pell Solberg, that, having a model of theirs or a piece of work, or just reading their articles is, unites everybody as a group of individuals who really enjoy a hobby. Yeah. You got guys in it from the very, very bottom who just like setting up trains around their Christmas tree, to guys that are professionals,
Yeah. And you can't excuse anybody.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because you never know when the guy who just casually sets up a train around his Christmas tree is going to end up being Pell Solberg.
Exactly.
You have no idea. If you read everybody's railroad, published railroads that are featured in any of the magazines, I bet you 85% of them started out with a Lionel train around a Christmas tree.
Some sort of train going around a Christmas tree. That's right. And I always say, that's exactly how I started. But when I came down the stairs, they had my name on them. So I've been a model railroader since I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I never could walk away from it. Through my late teenage years and early 20s, I, got into the cars and all that stuff. But,
Yeah,
then I came back to it. It was always there. It was and it never really leaves. You're always kind of glancing over, and it's kind of always there, and
right.
and you can't ever excuse it. It's like,
I mean, like for me, going back to this evolution of a modeler or just a hobbyist in general, it's like, from a young age, I've read articles that you've written.
right.
Did I ever in my wildest dreams think I'd meet you, have a conversation with you for any amount of time, let alone you wanting to interview me for a podcast?
Yeah. Yeah.
Never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought that would happen.
Exactly. Exactly. But, it's like, but, because I went to see Lex that day and he was having a tough day and I put something up on social media and you saw it and we connected. I mean, it's like, and when I saw and then I started talking to you and seeing I'm thinking, well, this guy's got to be interesting. And of course, turns out you're just a natural at it and you got a great story. And so many people have these great stories. I mean,
Right.
your dad had the hobby shop and, that's how your mom met your dad and on and on and on it goes. And, at, at 19, you're an engineer for the BNSF. And now, we talk about the magic of being a conductor on the California Zephyr. I mean, this hobby is a real connection for a lot of people. It's a real connection and it's really cool. We're going to be talking to you lots and lots more times and follow all the progress on all this stuff. The steam locomotive thing sounds cool.
Yeah. I just sent you some pictures.
Perfect.
What I've done so far. I think I sent you a link to I set up a page for my N-scale railroad.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah, and I I was going to talk to you more about building the signals too, but I mean, you must have. Do you have some sort of a sense of? I mean, I love your enthusiasm for life and just get started, and of course, you had a very impactful moment with your biological dad that got you started down that road. But do you have some sense of how much you're doing in the hobby? Do you realize, like, not everybody's as active as you are, kind of thing?
No.
Okay.
I think that I don't know. In my circle, I think that everybody's just about as active. I mean,
okay.
I have a really close circle of friends that are obviously in the hobby, and I think they're just as active as I am. In fact, sometimes I feel like I'm trying to keep up with them. You know. But in turn, we all have. That's the beautiful part about the hobby is we're all into it for a different reason. My biggest. I've got 3 railroads that I'm building right now. I've got the N-scale railroad, I've got the 1 to 20 scale railroad, and then my big live steam railroad. And each one of them is purely for a different reason. The N-scale is 100% to see things on Soldier Summit that I didn't get to see. I'm trying to recreate history. And likewise with the 1 to 20 scale stuff is it's just kind of cool. Like, the 1 to 20 scale outdoor garden railroad is kind of just for me to get out of the house and make sure my yard still looks good.
Yeah.
Like give me a reason to go do some gardening and kind of some upkeep and take some pride in my yard. And the 1 to 20 or the 2.5 inch scale is just because I can't build a full size steam locomotive.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't have time to go and volunteer or even work part time at any of these railroads that I want to. I'd love to go work for the Cumbers and Toltec. I'd love to.
Yeah,
I'd love to work for the Durango and Silverton. I'd love to. I just can't afford to. I mean,
yeah.
It's not really in the cards for me to do so. So, but I can build a steam locomotive and I can run it around my yard. So that's where I'm going to kind of fill that void with.
Well, and building a K-27, I mean, if you guys master that, people will go crazy for that.
Yeah, we hope to. It's like the nice part about doing it in, on CAD and CNC is once we do one, we have the files to do as many as somebody would want.
Then it's just a matter of putting them together.
Yeah, that's it. So, and that's fun. That's model building. extreme
Okay.
model building.
Yeah, exactly. It is. Just like you said, rebuilding the Mustang, it's model building.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah, because you want it to be pristine and you want it to look good, so you do it as well as you can. I mean, building anything really is. I actually thought that several years ago when I started working on my Harleys on my own, because I used to have them worked on at the shop, and I tinkered around with cars as a kid, but that was back in the 60s and the 70s when cars were a lot easier to work on, like working on a 66 Mustang. And one day I'm going down the freeway in Florida, and I jump on the the brake, and there's a puff of smoke, and there's no brake. And the guy, I had gotten the shop to put in stainless steel brake lines, and he'd put them right against the bottom of the motor, and it just rubbed right through him.
No.
And I thought, you know what? For $75 an hour, I think I could do this as good as this myself.
Right.
So, and then I started realizing, it's no different than, it's just, you just start wrenching on the thing, and, occasionally you get into trouble, but you slowly figure it out,
Yeah. Yeah. Just, I mean, once you get to a point where you're like, you know what, I do not want to pay somebody to do this, and I'm going to figure out how to do it. Everybody has the ability. It's just the ambition, you know?
And it's not that people aren't worth what they charge, because lots of people do a really good job. It's just that there's a great satisfaction in learning to do it yourself.
I agree 100%. I mean, I have a hard time paying somebody to do something I know that I can do. I mean, I think that anybody that's trying to raise kids obviously wants to save as much money as possible, because kids are expensive.
Yeah.
And so that's there's many different drives in doing things on your own. And for me, that's one of them. It's hard to give up money that I could spend on the kids or on the family to do something I know that I could do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I've just taken it to an extreme level where I am trying to teach myself things that I want to do because I don't want to pay somebody to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I think I understand where you're at, and it's like it all it's like me with the bikes, or me with the podcast, like I think what it is for all those kinds of people, it's like you never can really get, like on your end scale, you can't really get 3 or 4 guys over to work on it, because you want it just a certain way.
Right.
You want it done a certain way. I mean, the K27 sounds cool because it's something bigger, and it's something where 2 guys can get their hands on, and it only goes together one way.
Yeah.
And
the other cool part about building this, the bigger steam locomotives is I love people. A lot of people don't ever think they have, people don't even realize they have the opportunity to experience something like this. It's like, there's going to be people that I know show up to my house that experience this, that had no idea that they were going to even enjoy it. They didn't have any idea that this was even a thing, or how relative it is to a real locomotive. I mean, it is a real locomotive, but how real it is,
Yeah.
And just opening up this new little dimension to people that never would have experienced anything like this. And on the flip side, people who do want to experience something like this that didn't think they'd ever be able to, it's like, I want as many people to experience this as possible, because there's nothing cooler than being able to create motion with steel, fire, and water.
Oh, yeah. I speak of my friend, or the fella, I'll call him a friend, Shane Murphy in Tyler, Texas, who he was an avid HO model railroader, and he got into the live steam, and he just loves it because you got to get the coal, and to keep the thing going, you got to keep the pressure up, and he has a steam locomotive. He just loves it. He just can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's addicting in a weird way, because I mean, it's work, but it's fun work,
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, now we're going to tell everybody that we have an email address. It's modelerslife with 1 L. That's modelerslife@gmail.com. And we have a Facebook page. It's Modelers Life Facebook page, or you can go to facebook.com/modelerslife. And we have a website, modelerslife.com. And for those of you who want to hear more, there's patreon.com/modelerslife, which is a site where people can pay a few bucks a month and they get more podcasts. I have 2 free podcasts a month and a couple others sometimes, and then I started getting more and more stuff, and so then I just put on this site where people throw in a few bucks and they can listen to it all they want. And some guys, my friend Mike Wachowski, he lives in Green Bay, home of Lambeau Field, the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. And he drives to Sheboygan, which is about a 60-mile run, and he's working his way through all the podcasts a second time. He says he's learned more in a year listening to authors than he had in the last 20 of model railroad. So I find that to be a great compliment. So that's it. So now we have there's a special. What you have to do at the exact right time is you have to say "Happy Rails" to you. You think you can do that?
Right. The same time as you?
No.
We're going to say that.
No, you'll know when to. You'll know you will know when you're supposed to say it. All you got to remember is you got to say "Happy Rails" to you. And
Happy Rails to you.
Yeah, trust me, you'll know when you're supposed to say it.
All right.
How do you spell? How do you properly pronounce your last name?
It's phonetic. It's just Pinales.
All right. Okay. Cool. And what is the heritage of that?
Oh man, I think it's definitely Spanish.
Okay.
It's Hispanic.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. As far as I know.
All right. Cool. Well, Adam, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
Happy Rails to you.
It's another Lincoln Homer.